many of us are seeking in a very deep way to move out of survival and into thriving. All forecast for 2022. Welcome. I am Rachel Strivelli, a psychic. This is your first time here. You can see a video in which I predicted some of the elements of the pandemic before it hit, linked below. Today I'm looking at the forecast for the USA for fall of 2022. The first theme that I'm going to bring up with you today, because some of the things that I'm going to get to later might cause a little bit of discomfort and perhaps even fear. The first thing we're going to address together is, have you recently evaluated how you handle fear and anxiety? As we move into the season of fall and get into continued cooler weather, and even with the erratic weather patterns that we have, it's more and more important to have an effective way that you handle stress and anxiety. Over the past number of years, there have been things that caused many people to have increased level of stress and anxiety. You may have picked up habits that were not incredibly helpful. Stress eating, more drinking, other substance use. Maybe you haven't been exercising. Maybe you consume a lot of negative news, doom scrolling. Whatever it is that you internally feel is potentially making your fear and anxiety worse, this is something that I want you to look at in this time period. I'm not making any judgments about your behaviors and your habits. This is simply an invitation for you to look anew, look again at, how do I handle stress and anxiety? For me personally, 2 years ago, I quit drinking because my intuition told me, stop drinking alcohol. I didn't even used to drink that much, so I was not that crazy with this request, but I went for it anyway. What I noticed was, even though I typically only had, let's say, 3 drinks a week, by not having drinking as an option at all, there were times where I wanted to go to a beer as a crutch. Either I was in a social setting and I thought, this is something I can do with my hands. The alcohol will make me a little bit more loose and conversational. The things that I relied on it for, I no longer had, and it really brought into my awareness, here's how I'm using this external thing, this substance, to buffer or mitigate my everyday experiences. So that was my own reflection on, here's a habit that I have and how am I using it. Recently, again, periodically I look at my social media use and my online habits. And I'm entering that phase again where I'm looking at, how much am I checking my phone? How much am I looking at these things? Is it bringing me joy or is it bringing me distraction? Is it bringing me stress or is it bringing me satisfaction? For you, taking this time, this seasonal time as things are changing outside, to look at, how do you handle fear and anxiety? Is there a way that you could start handling it differently that will be more beneficial for you, that'll make you feel better? Because it makes me unhappy to say this, but I do find there are going to be more stressors coming over the next few months and or weeks. Let me get into this next issue that maybe is weighing on your mind. Whether or not you think that you take in too much media, whether or not you spend time doom scrolling, there is a call for you to look at, what are your online consumption habits? What are your consumption habits of the things that you're taking in? When I looked into the energy for today, I got this feeling. It's a little bit like if you celebrate Thanksgiving and you've eaten a huge feast and you feel like you're full almost up into your chest, and even this feeling of indigestion is coming or heartburn. I got a feeling of the whole gastrointestinal stomach cavity being so full, like full to the brim, from somebody who's either been binging or stuffing or feasting. The feeling along with that of, perhaps the feasting was satisfying, but now you know, ooh, indigestion is coming. Ooh, I'm gonna feel pretty bad as my body processes and digests all this food. My take on this, beyond try not to overconsume for Thanksgiving, try not to overconsume delicious foods for the holidays. Also making a mental note for myself, Rachel, do not overconsume. And beyond food, looking at the other things you consume. I am very aware of the media that I consume on my phone, on my TV, the books that I read. I have accepted the fact that I'm a sensitive person. And so certain things, if I read a book, it's going to stay with me longer. If I watch a show, the emotions of that show are going to stay with me longer than they might with someone else. So I'm thoughtful in my selection of media that I consume, because I have an awareness of how I want to feel tomorrow, how I want to feel the next day, my goals, my desires, my intentions. And I want the things that I consume to either entertain me, give me a wonderful escape, open my mind to new things, or make me feel a certain way. I'm not looking for entertainment that makes me feel scared. I don't like psychological thrillers, those types of things. Now I'm saying this is my personal preference. That's why I'm sharing that with you. So for you to think, what are the things that you're consuming? And when was the last time you did an evaluation of, let me see what I'm consuming here. Let me see if this is helpful for me. Or am I consuming so much that I might feel full as if I've feasted, but there's an indigestion that goes along with it. There's an indigestion coming. Or I might feel great because I binged an hour of TikTok, but then how do I feel afterwards? Do I feel like I took in too much? Because honestly, with the way that social media is and the speed with which it moves, there's a beauty to this, and I love the creativity, and I love how fast things move in some ways. And also, many of you need to be aware of, am I taking in so much that there's no time for my body to relax? There's no time for there to be a settling and letting my nervous system feel good and letting my body settle. I have an article and a video linked below where I share about calming your nervous system. Things that you can do like meditation in nature or walking in nature, mindfulness in nature. Any of these things you can do after you have feasted on these things, after you have perhaps overconsumed. What is the thing you can do to alleviate that discomfort? If you had overconsumed food, you would probably maybe take a Tums or digestive enzyme or ginger tea to help with your digestion. But what do you do when you've had an overconsumption of things for your emotions or of your mind or of your soul? This again ties back to the last one about dealing with fear and anxiety. If you've taken in so much that you're feeling this sensation of fullness, you also want to give yourself time to adjust to that, to digest that, to relax. Now, I also want to say, I know that for some people, there's enough negative traumatic experiences that you've had that you don't like that feeling of emptiness. You don't like a feeling of an empty stomach, maybe because it does relate to not having enough food or resources in the past, or maybe it's something else that when you feel the emptiness, it causes you to have a fear reaction, to have an anxiety reaction. And if that is the case of what you're working with, then I would say give yourself time to slowly approach this feeling of emptiness, to slowly give yourself contained periods of dealing with that feeling of not being full so that you can get more accustomed to it. Because it's something that every one of us is going to have to experience, the feeling of when the tide goes out and then when the tide comes back in. As much as you can set your life up for exuberant happiness, financial success, love, all of those things, there are always going to be ebbs and flows in life. The beauty of being resilient and of moving through life gracefully is of wondering, exploring, and experimenting. How do you move through the ebbs of life equally as good as you can move through the flows of life? There's a wonderful book that came out a few years ago called Wintering, and it's around this same theme as well. And I have a program that's linked below that's about restoring yourself in the winter time and taking the quieter time of year to focus on restoration, to use this ebb time for your own resources, for your own building up, for your own replenishing, for your own rooting down, similar to how the trees do it, so that when the time is different, when the flow is coming in, when the spring is here, when there's all the new growth and new energy and new life, you are feeling ready. You're feeling energized. You've worked with your consumption habits. You've figured out, this is how I handle stress and anxiety in a healthy way in this time in my life. The next theme that came up was related to a few concepts that are interconnected. I'm going to go through all of them in an interconnected way. So there's this concept of home. There's a concept of a siege, or something that forces you to stay within your home, within your contained space. And also this sense of, how is your home a place of security and this foundational setting, this foundational nurturing home that deeply benefits and supports you and makes you feel secure. Several weeks ago, I started feeling the rumblings energetically that in the US this fall, there's going to be some type of siege where it feels different than a lockdown, although maybe it will be a lockdown, but siege was the word that was coming up, where people are going to be required to stay in their homes for a period of time, similar to when we did the lockdown in 2020. And this period of staying in your home it feels as if it is being done to suppress or to de-escalate unrest, political uprising. I'm not exactly sure what is the cause of people being required to stay in their homes, but it feels as if in the streets, if you will, in society, there's something that's causing a lot of unrest. Again, it might be political, it could be health, although it doesn't feel like it's health. And this political and or economic and or social activity, unrest or uprising, in order to somehow maintain a calmness or a sense of establishment or to tone down things and de-escalate the situation, people will be required to stay in their homes for a period of time. Now, I know that with any type of prediction like this, with any type of forecasting, it's equally possible that this won't happen. And if that is the case, how wonderful will that be? Because we all love to have the freedom of coming and going as we will. The reason, however, that I'm sharing this with you is so that I want you to feel that you have done the preparation that you need to do, so that you feel, this is back to the stress and anxiety and fear. How do you handle those things? How can you ensure that your home is the best setting that you can create for you with your resources that you have in this time frame? Now, let's say we did find out, on a Monday, they tell us everybody has to stay home starting on Tuesday or Wednesday. Well, if you don't have a stocked pantry, you're going to be a little bit scrambling. If you don't have some extras of some things that you like to consume on a regular basis, this is a great time to stock up. Seasonally, what I'm asking you to look into and reflect tracks well with what the animals are doing. The squirrels for months have been gathering the acorns, putting them in, maybe not quite months, it depends on where you live. The squirrels have been gathering acorns, putting them in their little nooks and crannies so that they are stocking up for the winter. So regardless of what happens with political landscape or social landscape or a siege, for you to stock up on things that you eat, things that you drink, things that you consume in various ways, and make your home feel more nourishing, more nurturing, more supportive to you. Maybe that's some cozy pillows or blankets. Maybe it's some new kinds of tea. Maybe that means, when I first got this calling, I told my husband, let's work on communication in our relationship a little bit more. Let's also work on our communication with our kids a little bit more, so that we have harmony in the home. Let's look at the things we have. I have 2 small children, and so inevitably there's always an influx of toys. We've been looking at, okay, how do we move things along, give them away, reevaluate the things in our home? How is it supporting us? How are we using it? So along with this, there is the news media has really been talking a lot about home prices, mortgage rates, and homes again and again for a number of months, somewhat, but it's also been ramping up the last couple of weeks. Now, what I want to point out to you is when I receive information for a client or for an organization that I'm doing a reading for, or for a business, what I will find is oftentimes there's a symbol that works at multiple levels, or there's meaning at a surface level, there's meaning at a different level, there's meaning at a lower or a deeper level. Here's what I find that relates to this idea of home that's being brought up in the media a lot, is whether or not these people are conscious of it. In society, again, we are having this deep turning of our awareness back to home. What is the value of home? What is the cost of home? What do you put into it? What do you gain from it? Is it worth it? Does everyone get a home? All of these issues of home that are coming up in the media are also how, as a society, we are grappling and reevaluating and redistinguishing and rediscovering how do we relate to home, both at an individual level, at a community level, and at a societal level. Pretty much ever since the pandemic began, home has been a thing that we've been playing around with and looking at. This time period we're in right now, November, December, potentially even into January, it feels like with the eyes and awareness and whatever we gained of insight from 2020 and the pandemic and our reevaluating of some of those issues and behaviors, habits, and ideas, it feels as if with our eyes and perspectives now, we're again returning to some of those same things that were brought up and brought to our attention earlier in that period. What you're consuming, how do you have this handling of the stress, security, home, comfort, all of those things. Prior to this, it was more focused in health. I don't feel that now it's as much of a health focus as more as it is an inner health focus. Some of those same themes, issues, big ideas and values that came up in that time period over the course of months, we're having a time to look at it anew. And I'll come back to this as well. As the media keeps on talking about home, mortgages, all of these home related things, you can use that every time as an invitation to reflect on your own ideas of home. Reflect on, does your home serve you right now? Do you like how it's set up in a physical way, in an emotional way, in a security way? I'm not talking security systems, but if that's important to you as well, great. But security, your home is so important for you having a deep-rooted sense of safety, of security, of shelter. Many of us are seeking in a very deep way to move out of survival and into thriving. If you have felt over the last few years that various events and occurrences either caused you to feel more in survival mode emotionally, or you literally have been just surviving and getting by, is there a way that you can deepen into your life to find a way to, how do I give myself the things that I need to survive so that I can emotionally move beyond this? An interesting thing that sometimes happens, and maybe frequently happens, is if you spend quite a while in the survival mode, when you're not actually in the same external circumstances and conditions that cause that survival, you can still be operating from a survival mode mindset, even though your situation is a lot better. If you have had moments over the past few years of deeply being in survival mode, this is a great time for you to calmly and kindly to yourself look at, what am I doing about this feeling of security and stability? Am I giving myself the foundational things that make me feel calm and secure no matter what is happening outside of the walls of my home? For years, I have always had the perspective of my home is like a sanctuary from the rest of the world. When I come home, I take off my shoes. That's the happy place. That's the pretty place. That's the place where I recharge my batteries, where I feel good. And for me, the yard also encompasses that. Now, you may or may not have this perspective of your home, and I invite you to, can you look at, how does your home make you feel? Is there a way you can improve that? Is there a way you can lean into, I am surviving. I do have the resources. I have security. I have stability. If you have not started any type of meditation or spiritual practice in your life, this is another thing that for me goes along with home, because it's very foundational for your well-being and for having a good way of life. Because even if you don't have a home or you're not at your home, you can always return to your meditation or your spiritual practice no matter what else is happening around you. So similarly, the external circumstances don't matter so much as your internal circumstances. And the way that you can create a main way that you can create positive, nurturing, helpful internal circumstances is through meditation, is through prayer, is through a positive spiritual practice, is through mindfulness and nature. Giving yourself the opportunity to deeply nurture yourself. This leads me to one of the last themes for this energy forecasting, this fall forecast, is this phrase self-kindness came. And I thought, isn't that funny? I've seen, as you have, I'm sure, self-love, self-care, self-trust is a big one that I believe in. A lot of these other self ones, self-acceptance, self-confidence. Up until today, I don't know that I've heard self-kindness. I think it goes along with self-acceptance. And perhaps if self-love is a little too much oomph for you, if self-love is a little bit too dramatic and intense for you to work with right now, can you lean into self-kindness? Can you lean into, what would be a kind action for myself? It's a little bit sometimes easier and gentler to be kind, because you don't have to love someone to be kind to them. It helps, but it's not necessary. And I hope that you do love yourself and cultivate self-love. But the focus very much here was of self-kindness. And then it goes back to this, how we handle fear and anxiety. Making yourself a cup of tea to feel good, and a nurturing tea that's got great herbs or whatnot in it that nourishes your body, or a detox tea if you're detoxing. What are the other ways that you can have self-kindness? Can you have clothes that fit you well or that make you feel good, that don't have itchy tags? Could you have soft blankets or pillows in the place where you relax? Could you take off your shoes at the door so your house stays cleaner and you think, this feels really kind to live in a clean environment? These are some very practical things, but you may have other thoughts. Maybe there are people that you have relationships with, work or friends or neighbors, who it would behoove you, it would benefit you to have more self-kindness with how you relate to them and how you let them relate to you. Perhaps some self-kindness is taking a break for 2 weeks or a month from an app, a relationship, an event that you always go to. Sometimes we need these pattern interrupts to give yourself permission, to give yourself a breath of fresh air to say, I'm taking permission to sleep in today. I'm taking permission not to go to that thing I always go to offer myself kindness, to see what do I need that maybe I didn't need 2 months ago, or that maybe I didn't need when I started going to that yoga class, when I started attending that knitting circle, when I started going to that book club, when I started shopping at that grocery store and eating that one snack that they always have there. None of these things are bad, but this time of year is a great time for reflection as to, are the things that you have made habits, are they serving you? Are they kind for you? Are you practicing self-kindness? How could you practice some self-kindness in a new way? Last week, I deleted an app that is one that allows me to stay connected to people. I had used it for 2 years. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But there was something in me that I had this intuitive hit, this impulse one day, and I thought, I really need a break from this. And what I hadn't realized when it was there on my phone was, although it made me feel connected to people and I had a lot of joy connecting with them in that way, I knew what was going on with their lives, and same for me. It also felt like it was creating more static and more stuff in my life. Initially, when I deleted the app, I thought, oh, I'll go back to it in 2 weeks. But I don't know if I will go back to it because I'm enjoying not having it. That has also, for me, caused me to look at a few other commitments that I had made that were going on that maybe I don't actually want to do anymore. Am I just signing up for the thing that I've already been doing, that's a monthly thing or a seasonal thing, because that's what I've been doing? I'm looking again at, but do I really want to do this? Is this still deeply serving me? Because I love life. I love knowing that, yes, life is short in some ways. So how do I want to spend this season? Each one of us, we only have so many more falls left, so many more autumns in our lives. Can you make this autumn one that feels kind to you, that practices self-kindness? And a lot of these things that I'm saying, it's not that you would take a weekend necessarily and purge everything. I like the idea of a whole season. If fall is the season of self-kindness, what are the things that you do that really set yourself up for great habits, for good, positive things going on in your life? And every week, you could set a reminder on your phone or put it in your calendar. Every week, I'm going to look at, am I practicing self-kindness today? If you want me to send you emails, I have an email list. You should sign up below. There's a free manifesting short course and also a guide on improving and increasing your intuition. In my community of people who receive information from me via email, I send encouraging things. I send calls to action of, is it time to look at self-kindness again? Is it time to reset and reboot some of how you practice dealing with fear and anxiety, handling it? How are you practicing self-kindness right now? And the last thing that's a piece of this, maybe also a piece of the home and a piece of just practical living, is if this is the time when you're stocking up on food and you're making your home cozy, you can also let this be a time of resetting and rebooting things of technology. As I said, I deleted an app. After I deleted that app, the next day I went through and I deleted every other app that I don't use on a regular basis. And I told myself, you can always reinstall it, but let's make a clean slate. I've also been going through other technology and unsubscribing, canceling subscriptions, resetting my passwords. So taking a time to evaluate the whole technology of your life, to reset some passwords that you haven't reset, to unsubscribe to some things that you haven't really read or don't really care for anymore, to reboot in certain ways. Maybe it's just a reboot of your computer, of your phone, system restore. The trees take this time to root in with their roots, and they actually have a lot of root growth in the fall and the winter, because this is when they're working on the foundational things. These are the behind the scenes things that we don't notice. The leaves aren't there, so we don't notice what's going on with the trees, but under the ground, there's a lot going on under the surface. I encourage you to check out, I have a book coming out very soon called Talk to the Trees. Again, if you're not on my email list, I'll be letting you know when you can pre-order it, when that book is coming out. The trees have a lot of wisdom to share us. They've lived a very long time of resilient lives. And some of what humans do, we could benefit by adding in some of the tree wisdom, because these are our elders that have been on this planet for such a long time. So this is a great time to return to the trees, to look to the trees, to gain insight and information from them. So rebooting, resetting passwords, making a clean slate on some of the apps on your phone, giving yourself a break from some of the things you do, especially as you go into what is typically a holiday season, because there's going to be more coming in. I talked before about this feeling of feasting so much that it's like you're full and there's this feeling of upcoming indigestion. If you haven't let anything go, if your schedule is packed full, if your phone is packed full, if you have so many things going on, it's going to feel even more full moving into the next couple months. However, practicing self-kindness to say, I'm going to pace myself. I'm going to be radically self-kind to myself this season. I'm going to kindly assess how I'm treating myself. Because especially women, we've been trained, we've been socialized, we've been taught, and some of it I'm sure is biological too, of having kindness towards others. And depending on what religious background you have, the season coming up is all about kindness and cheer too. But how much do you prioritize self-kindness compared to the kindness you do towards all kinds of other people? It's very common, especially if you're a people pleaser, especially if you're an empath, especially if you're a mom, especially if you're born a female, to spend so much time being kind to others, but not very much time at all looking at how are you practicing self-kindness. You may not be able to totally tip the scale and say, well, I was 80% being kind to other people before, and now I'm 80% being kind to myself. It's okay if you can't do that right away, but I want you to work on shifting this balance, shifting this scale. Because quite frankly, you are living in imbalance if you are acting kind to all of these people, but you're not practicing any self-kindness. Your self-kindness is essential in this age, in this season, in this year, in this month, in this day. If you're watching this right now, there is at least one area of your life that you can practice more self-kindness, that you can lean into it, that you can love it, that you can say, one method that I like to use a lot is I will take out a piece of paper, title at the top, how can I practice self-kindness today? Brainstorm as many things as I can think of over the next 5 minutes, put down everything, even if it's crazy, because you gotta let the crazy ideas out, because then they'll loosen up and let all the other ideas come out. And sometimes the crazy idea is actually not that crazy. So you get your list. Maybe you do it 3 days after that, 5 days after that, 10 days after that. Maybe every Monday, I like to call them me Mondays. I focus a lot on myself on Mondays. How am I being kind to myself this Monday? And letting that carry every day. Your self-kindness can change your life in a subtle and nurturing way that works from things at the foundation, at the root, at your root chakra, coming from the sense of security and stability. Working with yourself on what is kind to myself today. How can I practice self-kindness today? If you live in a country other than the US and you want me to do an energy reading, a fall forecast for your country, comment below, let me know. Or if you have an organization that you want me to look at, what is the forecast for your organization for the next couple months? What are the trends and patterns and issues, positive and or negative, that are going to be coming up so that you can work with them? I do one-to-one readings, and I also do readings for companies, for businesses, for organizations, for nonprofits, because the business and organization has an energy. It has a path it's going to take in the world. It has trends and things that are going to happen to it. It has how the people interact with it. It can be very helpful to get a reading for your organization, for your business, for your school, for your nonprofit, and most of all, for yourself. It has been a pleasure. See you in the next video.